This video is sponsored by Adepta. More about them later on. What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and it's time for another episode of the best armies in Warhammer 40k, the weekly video series where we go through undefeated results from the last weekend of competitive games and talk about what's at the bleeding edge of the competitive metagame. It's currently 1:28 a.m., and I'm coming off of streaming 6 games from the Lone Star Open, so this is going to be a relatively short episode. That said, we did have some enormous events this weekend, including the World Team Championship WTC, where a lot of the eyes of the world were focused. That also means that we get to cover some larger events, including the WTC War Masters single event. While the WTC was definitely the focus, and I'll be doing some content about that later on as we get through the week, we did have some other larger events going down that included the Lone Star Open that I was part of, as well as the Krefeld Major. So let's dive into a metagame breakdown and talk about exactly what's winning. And shocking everyone, it's Death Guard still, like all the time, almost everywhere. Interestingly, the smaller events that we had going on this weekend saw some other factions doing well, but basically every large event that was of super major or major level size and higher was dominated by Death Guard, meaning that their consistency over 5 or 6 round events in highly competitive metagames is ridiculous. This included the Lone Star Open, which saw 3 out of its 4 X and O players playing Death Guard, the Krefeld Major, which saw 2 of its 4 X and O players playing Death Guard, and the WTC War Master, which was won by an 8-0 undefeated Death Guard player. Imperial Knights are also unsurprisingly doing fairly well at smaller events. They did take an undefeated spot at the Krefeld Major, but also took down the WOG Master 4 Summer Showdown and Great Game Gongai Summer GT. Adepta Sororitas also kind of coming out of the woodwork with 3 undefeated results, especially at some of the smaller events. This includes the Arch City GT4, Your Hobby Place Road to Nova event, and CruitCon 2025. Interestingly, I think all of these had 2 undefeated. That's just kind of an idiosyncrasy of the meta, I guess. Adepta Sororitas are apparently really good if the event comes down to 2 undefeated at the end. Genestealer Cults also saw an undefeated spot at CruitCon 2025. Tau Empire took down the Eagle Hammer GT. Astra Militarum went 6-0 at the Iowog Moose-tacular GT. And Space Marines coming in hot with 3 separate chapters getting undefeated results. Deathwatch alongside Sisters at the Your Hobby Place Road to Nova, Blood Angels as another undefeated Space Marine from the Krefeld Major, and Ultramarines alongside, again, Adepta Sororitas at the Arch City GT4. A little bit of love from both compliant and non-compliant Space Marine chapters. So let's get into these lists and talk about what's winning just after a word from our sponsors. This video is sponsored by Adepta. Adepta's been a huge supporter of the channel for a while, so I'm excited to talk about them and their new updates. For those who don't know, this is a dice probability calculator app that can give you quick and easy access to expected dice results at your fingertips. So if you're wondering about particular unit builds, or you want to know what the best course of action in a particular game state might be, you can use Adepta to very quickly get those results by importing unit profiles and quickly spitting out expected damage. This can help you smooth your army list building or give you insights into the game. And their latest update takes into account a ton of player feedback, improving things like unit profile imports, making it easier to import your datasheets and their weapon stats into the dice calculator, a full modifier and ability section to more easily input all types of attacker and defender special rules, a wider selection of results to grant you a deeper understanding of the results, as well as a new text summary to more easily understand the math you're looking at in English. So follow the links down in the video description to get access to Adepta today. And big thanks to them for sponsoring the video. So we're starting things off with the WTC War Master GT. Now, the WTC is the World Team Championship. It's the largest international team competition for Warhammer 40k and pits teams from dozens of different countries against one another. But on the lead up to the event is the War Master GT, which is a singles format event, allows WTC participants to show their mettle in a 1 versus 1 capacity. This is one of the highest profile events of the season and was won by Albin de Polignac, who was running, surprise, surprise, Death Guard to an 8-0 record. Although it does look like he had some tough games along the way, winning only 11-9 in differential scoring to Innes Wilson in the final game. Now, Alban was playing a Virulent Vectorium detachment. This is the detachment that gives you sticky objectives. You're able to lock in objectives if you hold them at the start of your turn, and then they will remain under your control and even project their own aura of contagion. The index style detachment, if you will. This is interesting because more often than not, we've been seeing Mortarian's Hammer as kind of the go-to standard for competitive Death Guard play, at least over here in the US. However, a raw, vehicle-focused, shooting-oriented variety of list is probably slightly less effective in the more condensed tables with heavier terrain that we typically see in the WTC format, at least in standard and heavy tables. So we're focusing a little bit more on melee units and close range attacks. This includes a Biologus Putrefier alongside a Malignant Plaguecaster to attach to a Plague Marine unit, give them 5-up critical lethal sustained hits. The classic combination, even in Virulent Vectorium, if you are attacking an afflicted enemy, you can give them full hit and wound rerolls, which seems pretty good. We also then have a Demon Prince of Nurgle with Revolting Regeneration to give him a 5+ Feel No Pain, so he's really tough to kill. We have a Lord of Contagion with Furnace of Plagues to give that guy additional strength, attacks, and devastating wounds, alongside a second Lord of Contagion and a Lord of Virulence. We have 10 Plague Marines to go with the Plague Marine combo, alongside a Rhino to bring them into the fight. 2 Desperate Terminator units with Lords of Contagion, alongside the combination of Fetid Bloat Drones to go alongside the Lord of Virulence. They have Heavy Blight Launchers, which is a ludicrously efficient blast weapon, which then gets hit rerolls to trigger lethal hits thanks to the Lord of Virulence. Following that up, we do have 1 Fetid Bloat Drone with a Flesh Mower, alongside 2 Mephitic Bloodheilers and 3 units of 10 Poxwalkers for utility. This is basically a stock standard Death Guard list. If I were to look into the dictionary for a Death Guard list, it would look like this. It is not Mortarian's Hammer, which is interesting, but other than that, it's basically the same as all the other Death Guard lists that we've talked about on this show. So congratulations to Adban for taking on one of the most competitive events of the season. It is unfortunate that it had to be done with Death Guard, but you know, when you're at that level of competition, I guess you have to take every edge that you can get. Now with that, we're going to move over to Germany and talk about the Krefeld Major. This is another one of the larger events of the week. The WTC War Master pitting 255 of some of the most competitive players in the world against each other. This one with 164 registered. The event only ran 5 rounds, which means that with 164 players, it was always going to have a lot of undefeated. This included our number 1 placer, Christian Schachmann, who was running Imperial Knights. Christian was running a Noble Lance, including Canis Rex, a trio of Cerastus Knight Atropos, as well as 4 Armiger Helverins. That's it. That's the list. We've been seeing a lot of the triple Atropos lists around lately. They are ridiculously good at killing other vehicles, which oftentimes means they counter their own counters, because most of the reliable anti-tank in the game is mounted on vehicle chassis, and Cerastus Knight Atropos can deal with basically anything. They get those bonuses to attack other vehicles, and especially Titanic units. They also have blast weapons, so they can clear infantry, and a solid melee profile, so they're good all around. Canis Rex also is really good. I don't know, we've seen this list a bunch of times. It's an Imperial Knights list. Let's talk about a different faction. Now let's move over to the land down under and talk about CrewtCon 2025. This was a 78-player event, and again had several undefeated results. We'll be talking about all of these today, but we're going to start with Tyler Visser, who was running Adepta Sororitas. Now, Tyler was running a Champions of the Faith army. Now, when this detachment came out, we actually saw a big push towards it from Adepta Sororitas players. However, that's kind of fallen off more recently. But obviously, it's coming back a little bit with Tyler taking down an event using the detachment. Now, Hallowed Martyrs is the other very common detachment in this faction, and all of the other undefeated results this weekend were using Hallowed Martyrs, but this Champions of the Faith list is always interesting. This includes Morvenval, a pretty standard inclusion. We're going to have a Paragon War Street Squad. They're going to do absolutely heinous things to monsters and vehicles, and also mostly everyone else. We have 3 Hospitalers. One of them does equip a Sanctified Amulet, which prevents enemies from setting up within 12 inches of the bearer from reinforcement. This beats close deep strike effects, especially things like Death Shroud Terminators, which can mean that the Hospitaller can lead the way and try to defend your army against incoming close deep strikes, or potentially just hang back and guard your home objective. We have a Battle Sister squad alongside 30 Celestian Sacrosants. That's 3 units of 10, 2 of them equipped with Hallowed Maces, 1 of them equipped with Anointed Halberds. Following that up is a Dominion squad. 4 of those are going to be rocking Melta-Guns. We have 3 Castigators for some backline shooting. 1 is going to be rocking a Battle Cannon. Oftentimes you see that one set up for the autocannon varieties, since the Battle Cannon ignores cover, but the autocannons are only coming in at AP1, so the Battle Cannon's initial shot can be the equivalent of AP2 into a lot of targets. It also doesn't care about range, so you can start by plinking at a long distance and then getting up close and personal with the other Castigators. You then can sort of chain the +1 to AP effect down a line. So the Battle Cannon Castigator can shoot a target, grant +1 AP for the Autocannon Castigator, which can flip a Stormbolter attack into a second target for the second Autocannon Castigator to benefit from, shoot its Stormbolter attack into something else, which you then fire at with Paragon Warseas or something similar. So you can kind of chain that AP effect a long way, and you basically get a pseudo version of it with the Battle Cannon Castigator who starts the line. We then have a unit of Paragon Warsuits alongside a trio of Immolators to combat squad that Dominion as well as the Battle Sister squad, and give you a lot of early game presence, since you're going to be able to scout up to 2 of those Immolators thanks to the attached Dominions. Now, the Celestian Sacrosants are kind of the core of this detachment. Alongside the Hospitallers, they get a Feel No Pain and can be regenerated back into the unit. And you have a lot of huge, very powerful buffs for these melee-centric armies. They're going to get +1 weapon skill, ballistic skill from being selected as a righteous unit. They also gain +1 movement, so it's easier to complete charges, especially with Miracle Dice involved. You can also use stratagems like Suffer Not the Unfaithful to give them lethal or sustained hits, probably sustained hits on most of them, since the Hallowed Maces are already lethal. And you can use To the Heart of Heresy to give them +1 strength and AP if they're righteous. So they're going to be hitting on 2s, sustained lethal hits, +1 AP, +1 strength, so you can go up to strength 5 or 6, depending on the style of weapon that you have, AP1 or AP2, again, depending on which weapon you have equipped. So that's a lot of bonuses on a unit that's already hard to kill, is also protected by the Champions of Faith stratagems as well, and altogether is a very aggressive, very difficult to deal with package. Now let's stay on CrudeCon for a moment here and talk about the first place placer, Michael House, who took down the event using Genestealer Cults. Now, Michael was actually playing an Outlander Claw detachment. It has been a while since we've seen this detachment on the battlefield, because it was very popular when the Genestealer Cult Codex came out. However, it was so popular that it ended up getting a lot of the component units nerfed. The army is including a trio of Benefictuses. One of them includes the Cartographic Data Leech, which gives +1 ballistic skill to the ranged weapons fired out of the firing deck of an embarked transport. And now one thing that we could potentially do with that is actually put all of the Benefictuses inside of a transport if we want to, and then they all benefit from that +1 ballistic skill. So you could be firing potentially 6 las cannon equivalent shots with +1 to hit, so hitting on 2s and ignore cover. They have hazardous, but the hazardous damage then goes on the vehicle, not the unit who's actually carrying the weapon, since the vehicle adopts the weapon. So if you overcharge your psychic powers in that way, it won't actually burn out the psyker if you fail. It just deals damage to the vehicle. So you can use that to sort of gain additional shots effectively outside of your Benefictuses. We then have a trio of Reductus Saboteurs for some early game board presence. We have a bunch of infantry in the form of a bunch of Acolyte hybrid units. Looks like 4 units of Acolyte hybrids with hand flamers, and then 3 units of Neophyte hybrids. The Acolyte hybrids with hand flamers are some of the best embarked units inside the Codex, because they do have a high OC, and they're also very dangerous to other utility units. So even if you knock down the transport that they're in, they're going to be still relatively effective. And The detachment focuses very heavily on these transport vehicles. It gives a vehicle and mounted units +1 objective control. It also gives your mounted units, your Adelan Jackals, objective secured, so they're able to lock in objectives under their control. However, in addition to that, you can also do things like give lethal hits to vehicles targeting enemies within 18. Again, you can do that on the Benefictus transport, so you can potentially get +1 to hit and lethal hits out of up to 6 las cannon shots, which is pretty cool. Is it cost effective? I'm not sure, but it is really cool. You can also do things like -1 damage on your Goliath rock grinders and trucks, reactive move and up downs on your vehicles and some of your mounted units as well. Now, moving on from that, we also have 3 Goliath trucks carrying those infantry around. We have a total of 4 Achilles Ridge Runners, 2 of them equipped with heavy mining lasers, 2 of them equipped with heavy murders and survey augers, so they're going to be stripping cover in addition to providing crossfire to their target. We have 2 units of Adelan Jackals in order to steal objectives and then grab them away with that OC. Though making those guys a higher OC as well makes them very good disruption pieces just on their own. And they also get access to things like a 6-inch reactive move, which can make sort of getting to grips with them really difficult. We then have 3 Goliath Rock Grinders. Now, the Goliath Rock Grinders can be the recipient of Devoted Crew for -1 damage, so they become very cost-effective bulwarks to kind of fight up the center of the battlefield, because they're only 120 points, and you're talking about a unit that has a fairly solid melee profile and has access to some very strong defensive stats. That means your opponent has to overcommit into them. If they're carrying around infantry, that just means they probably won't have the capacity to kill the infantry as well in the same activation, and that can either donate you objectives or put you into a better position to move up the table later on. So tons, not to mention the fact as well, all those vehicles are +1 OC too. So they're actually really good at taking objectives away from people. I think more surprisingly so, more surprising than people would necessarily give them credit for. Now with that, we're going to move over to the United Kingdom for Eaglehammer, a smaller 34-player GT. This event was won by Robert Leaper playing Tau Empire. Robert was playing an experimental prototype Cadre. It's been a while since you see this detachment on the battlefield, actually, because it actually kind of arrived to a bit of a whimper in comparison to Tau's more consistent detachments. But this army included 2 Cadre Fire Blades alongside Commander Farsight and Darkstrider. Now, the detachment grants +6 range to all your ranged weapons, and this can massively benefit things like Breacher teams. So we are running 2 Breacher teams to attach in with those Cadre Fire Blades. So if my math is correct, each of the Cadre Fire Blades attacks once it's benefiting from its own leadership ability 3 times, plus 6 more times from each of its gun drones. So it's attacking a total of 9 times, in addition to the Breachers all attacking 3 times. With the additional 6 inches of range, they can actually fire their high power blaster shot up to 14 inches, which gives them kind of an insane threat range when you're talking about a unit with as much damage potential as the Breachers have. You can also use stratagems like Threat Assessment Analyzer or Experimental Ammunition to improve those weapons even further, giving them +1 strength and AP in exchange for hazardous, or sustained or lethal hits, or both, again, in exchange for hazardous, one or the other, which makes these little units, which are relatively cost effective, especially just 150 points between the Breacher team and the character itself, deal incredible damage once you target an enemy on an objective against which the Breachers benefit with their wound rerolls. We then have a pair of Devilfish to carry those guys around in. 2 broadside battlesuit teams. We can heal these guys, which is actually kind of sweet, with automated repair drones. You can also give them -1 to be wounded against strength characteristics higher than their toughness with reactive impact dampeners, which can make them survive in a sustained firefight for a lot longer. We have a Crisis Sunforge team. The extra 6 inches of range is actually huge on the Sunforge team because it improves the distance at which they can melt enemies. Now, it looks to me like we're going to be attaching Commander Farsight into them, so most likely we're going to be trying to get into up close and personal for Commander Farsight to actually turn on his ability. But the benefit of going from range 12, which is the standard range for Crisis Sunforged battlesuits, up to range 18 is that when they are in range, the 9 inches to gain +1 to wound from Commander Farsight, they also are in range to Melta, which is pretty cool. We have a Go Skill battlesuit to hold down the middle of the battlefield alongside a Kroot Carnivore squad and a Pathfinder teams for some just mid-board control, some board operators. We have some spotters from a pair of stealth battlesuit teams, as well as 2 Riptide battlesuits. These guys equipped with ion accelerators and twin smart missile systems. Pretty standard stuff from those. Really cool to see this detachment doing well. The potential damage and trading power that it has out of the breacher teams is really sweet. Obviously this is available for other detachments to a lesser extent, like Mont Ka can make them fast and Cao Yan can make them hit sort of hard, but if you have the command points available to spend on them, none of those necessarily have the same level of output from breachers as experimental weapons cadre does, or experimental prototype cadre. Excuse me. Now with that, let's move over to Cedar Rapids, Iowa for the Iowog Moose-tacular. This was a 63-player event that went the full 6 rounds. This meant it went long enough to get a single undefeated at the end of round 5, and that undefeated was Jacob Ott playing Astra Militarum. Now, Jacob was playing a combined arms regiment, so lethal hits for hit stuff against things of a similar weight class. So your vehicles gain lethal hits against enemy vehicles, your infantry gain lethal hits against enemy infantry. Now, this detachment's seen a lot of play, especially focusing on big, heavy tanks, and that's what we're taking in this list as a little bit of an answer to Knights. Knights actually sometimes struggle with Leman Russ defensive profiles. It's a little bit inconsistent for them to kill them through their strong armor saves, and having mass lethal hits alongside some very heavy guns to begin with means that the majority of these Militarum cannons are actually going to be doing some pretty serious damage on the crackback. Now, this army is including Gaunt's Ghosts, so a little bit of utility from them, Ursula Creed for some free stratagems, Acadian Command Squad to hang out in the backline alongside Acadian Shock Trooper Squad. Kind of a benefit there is if you attach the two together. First of all, you gain Ursula Creed a Master Vox if she attaches into the combined unit, but you're also large enough to score for Cull the Horde, which is sort of a huge deal if you just keep them in the back line, because your opponent can't cycle the objective away, which is a really, really big benefit of getting these combined Master Vox units into Militarum armies. We actually saw that play out a little bit this weekend at the Lone Star Open. We have a Rogaldorn commander with Grand Strategist, so he's able to issue additional orders. Death Corps of Krieg Squad for some high OC objective control. What looks like 3 units of 5 Attilan Rough Riders, I think is what I'm reading there. The list format's a little bit funny, but I believe that's 3 units of 3, and those guys are very common as utility units. They do hit pretty hard if you need them to. You can issue them fixed bayonets, and they go to weapon skill 2, and they can actually kind of melt a lance down some stuff. But you can also just use them as a potentially move 15 with move unit that can run around and complete actions and maneuver secondaries and things. We have a Hellhound to strip cover from enemies, 3 Leman West Vanquishers. If you needed to kill Knights, oh man, here we go. Just enormous amounts of anti-tank shooting from these guys. They're also very efficient for a Leman Russ chassis, so they're the best points per wound you can get for a Leman Russ chassis, I believe, out of the Codex. They're also kind of long, which does have its own benefits. They're very good as like utility units in their capacity to like screen and make weird charges and engage things. They actually use the pivot mechanics kind of well because of they're very long and skinny essentially because of their big cannon. We have 2 Rogaldorn battle tanks as well to go alongside that Rogaldorn commander, as well as 2 Scout Sentinels. So an army entirely keyed towards shooting big stuff and making it go away. Definitely makes sense that in a metagame where we are potentially fighting tons and tons of Imperial Knights, an army like this would be fairly good. And even into armies that are a little bit more MSU oriented, but still focusing on those mass individual vehicle units, an army like this can potentially trade up really heavily. Now with that, let's move over to the Lone Star Open 40k champs. This is a massive 322 player super major being held here in Allen, Texas. I was there live streaming all weekend. Please go check out my coverage of the event because we'll be talking about an army that was on the stream several times. Now for 322 players, there were several undefeated. This included the majority Death Guard, but what we're going to be talking about today is Justin Moore and his Necrons. Now, I streamed Justin on my main live stream for the penultimate round. For the final game, and he actually played against Blood Angels in order to secure his undefeated record. I have that available for my YouTube channel members. So I have recorded games from all the events that I live streamed that are available for YouTube channel members and patrons. And his game is up there against the Blood Angels for the final game. As a bit of a spoiler, I guess. He does win that one, but It looked like it was a pretty close game, all told. Now, Justin was playing an Awakened Dynasty list. This includes a Hexmark Destroyer, Orokin the Diviner, a Royal Warden with Netherrealm Casket, so stealth for his attached unit, alongside a pair of Technomancers. Now, this is kind of a very classic Awakened Dynasty, but there's one big difference from other Awakened Dynasty lists that we typically see. Now, normally, we focus very heavily on 4+ Feel No Pain characters in this detachment. That includes the Luminor Ceres and usually a Scorpic Lord with a Nagic Dermal Bond for a 4+ Feel No Pain. Now, the benefit there is that you can use Protocol of the Eternal Revenant to bring those guys back to life after they are killed. However, as you will notice in this character section for this list, Justin took none of those. He decided he's too good for that, and instead focused all of those points both on his Necron Warrior brick. So we have 20 Necron Warriors with Gauss Reapers. Those guys are going to be able to attach with the Royal Warden for the mass stealth, and Orokin the Diviner because he's a Cryptek and he can dual attach for a 4+ invulnerable save. So that makes that unit ridiculously difficult to take down. The detachment gives you a reactive reanimation, and we're also playing a Ghost Arc for a second reactive reanimation. We then have a Reanimator in order to improve those reanimations. So this unit is pretty tanky and then can constantly regenerate models back in. We have 2 units of Canoptic Wraiths alongside a Cryptothrall unit. Now, Justin was actually attaching the Cryptothralls into the Warriors to further improve the size of the unit to make it more difficult to kill a majority of them in one crack. The double Wraith units have great synergy with Awakened Dynasty. Their poor weapon skill gets shored up by the +1 to hit from the detachment. They also can then reactive regenerate and regenerate a bunch of times. And even if you would kill their Technomancer that's attached in, giving them a 5+ Feel No Pain, he can just use Protocol of the Eternal Revenant to come back. So that's where we're focusing the majority of that stratagem. Rather than keeping combat characters alive or aggressive characters, we are going to be using it to keep the support characters inside the units alive. And that lets Justin play them a little bit more aggressively. So even if you're able to get epic challenges, for example, onto those models, they're still going to be able to respawn. Now we have a Deathmark unit for utility, as well as the actual damage in the list being coming from a trio of Doomsday Arcs sitting behind this wall of silver. And last but certainly not least, a Flayed One unit for an Infiltrator. Now we've seen Awakened Dynasties in the past. This is a little different, but it's no less scary. I kind of love the simplicity of it. It's basically 3 enormous unkillable bricks backed up by 3 Doomsday Arcs. There's no frills, there's no wild combos. It's just the core of this entire strategy basically written down on paper. Now with that, we're going to move over to the Your Hobby Place Road to Nova event. This was a 68-player event being held in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Again, this event had multiple undefeateds. It only went 5 rounds, and that included both Adepta Sororitas and the faction we're going to talk about because we're starting our Odyssey on Space Marines this week with Mark Hurdle, who took it down with Deathwatch. Now, if you are interested in this list, I actually streamed it 2 weeks ago at the Heart of War GT. So if you want to see Mark Hurdle's list in action, you can check out my coverage from that event because he played it several times, both on stream and I believe on the recorded table as well. He was running a Black Spear task force with a captain in Gravis armor with the Tome of the Exoclades, so he can get double oaths once per game, alongside a Beacon Angelus Judiciar that gives the unit a deep strike as well as a free rapid ingress once per game. So that Judiciar is actually able to hold in reserve attached to a unit, usually the 10 Deathwatch veterans, wait until your opponent comes in to attack one of the larger kill teams, rapid ingress next to them for free, and then heroically intervene and fight first to kill them. So it actually, that unit for 300 points just sitting in reserve makes most of your kill teams actually basically uninteractable by melee attacks, at least on melee attacks that you can't get around heroic intervention with somehow. We then have a Watchmaster as well with Thief of Secrets to improve his damage output. He usually gets attached to the Deathwatch veteran squad in order to give another little sort of counterpunch unit. Now from there we have an Intercessor squad to hold down the back line, a unit of Assault Jump Pack Intercessors for some early game utility, and the bulk of the list including 2 Deathwatch Terminator squads, 2 Indomitor kill teams, each of those equipped with 2 Heavy Bolters, 3 Flamestorm Aggressors, and 3 Eradicators. Following that up is a Storm Speeder Hammer Strike and Thunder Strike. Now, the way that Mark usually plays this list is that he keeps those Storm Speeders in reserve as well as the Indomitor kill teams. He starts the fight with the Deathwatch Terminators by teleporting them using site-to-site teleport into an aggressive position and clearing out his opponent's screens. Your opponent has to come back and overcommit into those Terminator squads in order to kill them. They are Terminators, so they don't go down super easily. And they do hit pretty hard when they come in because they have 3 Cyclone missile launchers apiece. And that usually requires an overcommittal from the opponent, which can get punished by the 2 Indomitor kill teams, then using a site-to-site teleport to teleport in their opponent's face. Both of the Storm Speeders dropping down at the same time and delivering an absolutely insane alpha strike. That is usually enough to cripple the opponent's army. It usually forces a retaliation from the opponent to charge into the Indomitor kill teams, who are traditionally not very good in melee. However, with that Beacon Angelus Judiciar waiting in the wings, he can teleport in and then heroically intervene to counter any melee that comes in. When it's working and your opponent hasn't messed with the sort of central combo, this army runs like a well-oiled machine. It basically executes a extremely strong, extremely maneuverable, and high damage game plan right off the bat, and then protects itself as well as it can, and usually overwhelms you with that alpha strike to the point that you're not really able to reasonably contend with it. Now, with that, we're going to move back over to the Krefeld Major to talk about Florian Schmidt, who took second place with Blood Angels. Florian was rocking a Liberator Assault group. This included a Rage-Fueled Warrior, a Foot Captain, alongside 2 more standard Foot Captains. All Foot Captains all the time today. Hot damn. A Captain with Jump Pack with Speed of the Primarchs to give him fights first, as well as a Combi Weapon Lieutenant. Not a single epic hero in sight today. We then have 3 Assault Intercessor squads, 5 models in each of those to attach the captains into, plus a standard intercessor squad for some OBSAC and utility to hold the backline. We have an Impulsor alongside 25 Jump Pack Assault Intercessors, 2 units of 10 and 1 unit of 5. That's insane. That's a crazy number of Assault Jump Pack Intercessors. Following that up is a pair of Ballistic Dreadnoughts, a Gladiator Reaper to clear out screens and utility units, destroy enemy infantry, an Infiltrator squad, as well as a trio of Scout squads for utility. So we have the 1 Jump Pack Captain with Speed of the Primarch. So he's going to be able to hop into one of these Jump Pack Assault Intercessor squads to give them +1 strength in the charge. So they're going to be able to go up to strength 7. They can lance and lethal hits to wound basically anything in the game on 4s or better. And the massive number of attacks these guys make is usually enough to put something down. On the Crackback, you're hitting with 11 models. It's unlikely you get killed in shooting on the way back unless your opponent's overcommitting into the Jump Pack unit. Then you can use Speed of the Primarch to swing back and clear out any sort of lighter melee units that are going to come swing at you. So that's pretty neat. Obviously, the pièce de résistance here is going to be the trio of captains with their Assault Intercessor squads. There's only 1 Impulsor, so delivery of those captains is actually kind of difficult, but we do have Advance in Charge potentially from Relentless Advance in order to get those guys up into the fight. And we can even use the Impulsor as a little bit of a staging point. So you can put it in a safe position, place 1 Assault Intercessor unit into it, and then sort of fire it off like a bullet. So you disembark them 3 inches away, advance, charge, go kill something, and then load a second unit into the Impulsor to do it again the next turn. I don't know if that's necessarily what was happening, or we were doing some more like standard strategic reserve and rapid ingress stuff, but that is oftentimes what happens when we have a single transport backing up all of these melee units. But from there, we have some solid shooting from the Ballistic Dreadnoughts and the Gladiator Reaper, as well as a bunch of utility to score. This is a really cool Blood Angels list. It's been a while since we've seen a list that has no Sanguinary Guard, no Death Company units. It's basically a Blood Angels list from a Bloodless Angels list, I should say, from back when they could gain access to +1 to wound from Oaths of Omen, which is we saw these styles of lists that had very few, if any, Blood Angel specific units. Well, they had to have no Blood Angel specific unit, and if they didn't, then they could gain +1 to wound, and you would get all of these little tiny Space Marine units absolutely cracked in melee. Once you were +2 strength, +1 attack, and a +1 to wound, they would go absolutely nuts. But in this case, it looks like we're playing regular old Blood Angels, and it still works. Liberator Assault Group is a good enough detachment that this style of list can still function, which is crazy. Now, with that, we're moving over to the 63-player Arch City GT4 being held in Columbus, Ohio. This event saw Garrett Thesey undefeated with Adepta Sororitas, but what we're going to be talking about today is the #1 placer, Conan Jennings, who is running Ultramarines. Now, Conan is playing a Stormlance task force coming out of Ultramarines and focusing very heavily on flying vehicles. Now, we've seen This style of list popularized by John Lennon. We also saw Josh Roberts from the UK pick it up for a while, and it has been making the rounds. This includes a combi weapon lieutenant, Marnius Calgar, Robute Gilliman, as well as Uriel Ventress. We have a duo of Ballistas Dreadnoughts, company heroes, a unit, usually for Marnius Calgar to hop into, but sometimes we do see Uriel Ventress hop in. Oh, actually, we have a Stern Guard veteran squad, so I imagine that Uriel actually hangs out with the Stern Guard veterans to get wound rerolls from them, and then we get the company hero squad attached into Marnius Calgar to make that combo of just insanely hard to kill character. We have a single Eradicator squad to go point and click some vehicles to death, a scout squad, a trio of Stormspeeder Hammer Strikes. Now, the benefit here is that these guys are flying vehicles, which means they can use Ride Hard, Ride Fast for -1 to be hit and wounded. And for only 125 points, they actually hit kind of insanely hard, especially if you're targeting an Oath of Moment target. They have a grand total of 7 multi-damage attacks. They're all kind of mid-strength. They're around strength 9-ish, but with +1 to wound, that really shores up that weakness quite a bit, and they're able to convert those attacks pretty consistently. And then on the crackback, your opponent has to overcommit into a 125-point little idiot in order to actually kill them. You can use Ride Hard, Ride Fast in order to give them -1 to hit and wound. You could do that for free with Gilliman, and then you can also do it with, you can pay a CP for Armor of Contempt, for example, to give them even more defensive benefits, which makes them even harder to deal with. Last and certainly not least, we have a Storm Raven gunship. That guy benefits from all of those effects as well. He also has a little bit of a side benefit in that he can transport a Ballistas Dreadnought around, which gives you extra movement potentially on turn 1, especially since anything in the army can advance and shoot for a command point in Stormlands Task Force as well. So pretty wild Stormlands builds. We've seen them pretty commonly. It's not like a super shock to see Ultramarines in this style of build. It feels really weird, but when you are trading so heavily up with not only your character units, between Uriel Ventress and Marnius Calgar, we have 2 really aggressive character units that are going to be really annoying. But you're also got these little storm speeders that are basically very difficult for your opponent to profitably engage with. And you get 2 Oaths of Moment thanks to Robute Gilliman. So you can constantly be dumpstering 2 things with those guys, just like hopping out of reserve or jumping in or advancing shooting on something. So pretty classic stuff from Ultramarines. And with that, those are all the best armies in Warhammer 40k for this week. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. Thanks as well to Adepta for sponsoring this video. I'm gonna go to bed because now it's like 2-3 a.m. and usually it takes like 4 hours to edit these videos down, and so it's gonna be long. So good night, everyone.